So this issue of costing and who pays, when someone else is doing all the paying and the tax, and Ben, it's perfectly fair game to say, all right, it's not something that's blinded with just the rich. The fact of the matter is, right now, half the people, half the households in this country are not paying taxes. Now, you can be for or against that, but ultimately, if you're not paying for something, are you watching the cost of that something? Joining Ben are Jonathan Honig and Mike Norman and Liz McDonald. Liz, what do you make of that?
Yeah, we're saying essentially no taxation with representation, because these U.S. households are getting a lot of federal benefits in the way of, the federal highway system. They're getting their security protection. The problem here, Neil, is that this trend line has been moving steadily up. 15% of taxpayers paid no federal income tax in the 50s. It rose to 38% just several years ago. Now it's around 47%. And
was the inflation-adjusted level at 50,000 now roughly the same?
Yes, it's inflation-adjusted that we're looking at. And this report came out of a center-left group, meaning the Brookings Institution, the Urban Institute. Now they're reiterating what people have known for some time. And when you talk about the 90% brackets that we saw in the 50s, that was at a time when the U.S. dollar was much stronger and U.S. industries dominated many sectors around the world. So we're in a different time right now. We can't be going back to that era when the rich pay all of the taxes, and it's way too skewed over to the one side where it's not meted out proportionately.
Liz, they already do.
I know.
Liz,
I hear what you're saying.
We're
in a danger zone right now. I hear what you're saying.
So, John, this is your point to whine again about how much you pay in taxes, but go ahead.
Well, Neil, listen, with all this talk about the rich, not paying their fair share, I mean, with all due respect to Ben, how much more really can they pay? The top 10% already pay 70% of all federal income taxes, and the bottom 40%, and I know those folks don't make a lot of money, but their they get an income, essentially, in terms of benefits from the government. So, we're essentially becoming the tyranny of the majority, not unlike Greece, whereas the majority is receiving all the entitlements, and a smaller and smaller minority is paying.
The majority is receiving nothing. Look, we're having a tremendous wealth transfer up to the top. The top 1% control 40% of the assets and the wealth in this nation. Let's go back.
They're paying 70%.
Look, 47% who don't pay
70% of the tax.
Let's talk about the spending.
No, just think about that. 40% of it.
They should have tax relief as well.
They've got the money. They can afford it.
But I don't agree with that data at all. Look at that data. Wait a second. Hang on. That data is off of IRS tax returns that don't take into account 401k and IRA accounts because they're not reported on tax returns. So that data that the wealthy, that the rich.
Making a brilliant point, and you interrupted.
But I'm disputing it.
I'm disputing it.
I did.
You interrupted.
Mike, go ahead.
No, look. On the question of spending, the government must spend at least as much as it intends to collect in taxes because it only accepts its own money for the payment of taxes. And people also want to save in the government's money, so that's why we run deficits, because the government supplies.
Well, guys, I guess what I understand what each of you are saying. Kristen Benz, I left you out of this. I apologize for that.
The blonde always gets left out.
The blonde, not at Fox. But is there any sense? Oh, I can hear the calls now. Rails on one. I always look, Kristen, at this, and I'm saying, I know what Ben is saying. They never address spending, and you're right. The only alternative then is Ben Bernanke put it, and Paul Volckers. Then you got to raise taxes. I see that, and I see where this is going. But it would be like someone selling you a lousy car, and then saying, well, you're going to have to pay more for that car. And it's a lousy car. So no one is disputing the fact it's a lousy car.
What's the lousy car in this analogy?
That's the next segment.
Plymouth?
What's the lousy car?
I don't know.
Our
government.
America's not a lousy car.
Our bloated, costly government.
America's a great
Let
car.
Kristen answer that.
Back to me.
Back to the blonde. All right, Kristen, what do you make of that?
Well, it's funny. Don't forget that 60% of Americans are employed by small business. So if they're sitting at home and they're not paying taxes, it's because they're not making any money, and that's really not going to help them get a job down the line. And this is exactly what we're talking about here, jobs for Americans, so we can have a recovery, not a jobless recovery. So if small business is taxed more, if we're all taxed more, it's not going to help them get off the couch and start paying taxes.
And by the way, taxes fund nothing. They regulate demand. The government has a monopoly on the issue of money.
We're paying more, but we're advocating just giving more to a beast that is unruly and unreliable.
Look, tax relief should occur at the low income and the middle income and at the high income.
Kristen, make a point here.
Would I like to make a point here? Absolutely. This begs the question for a flat tax. Why can't we,
All right,
give a...
but Ben, a final point from you.
I don't see any rich people suffering at the present level of taxation. All the people I know who are rich would have no problem paying substantially more tax. They could still have a very lush...
But what is your definition of rich? I had a guy on my show yesterday who was worth over $100 million, and he was advocating, well, we got to pay more, got to pay more. And I'm saying, well, you're in the same bracket as the $250,000.
Right. I'm not talking about people in the...
So what is?
I'd say people who earn $2 million a year or more are rich, and they can pay more tax.
$2 million is your point.
I know what you make in a week, but it's...
Incorrigible.
Ben, please send the IRS a check on all of our behalf, all right? Will you do us that favor?
If they ask me for it, of course.
No, if they ask him. Guys, I want
Yeah, only if they ask nicely.
But Ben has really made Fast and Furious friends here, hasn't he? It's like a whirlwind stop. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you
very
very
good
much.
seeing
Thank
you.
you.
The
Nice
book
to
is out. It's drawing rave reviews. And it's the same kind of advice here where he ends saying, look, the rich, you should get screwed more. Pretty much, right?
No, I'm saying that you should try to get rich.
You should, yeah, and then get screwed.